Hey guys, Pete here. So today I'm going to talk about some spin-off or prequel news for Game of Thrones. We talked about this almost a year ago when we first found out that they were probably going to be putting something into production. Since then, we heard that there were 4 spin-offs officially in the early stages. We got a blog post from George RR Marting himself a little bit after that saying that there were actually 5. And not a whole lot of info at that time. We did find out who the original 4 people that HBO had working on it was, but not the 5th. And that's what we found out this week. We found out that Bryan Cogman, who was, or is, I should say, an executive producer and writer on the HBO series, is working on the 5th one, and he's actually working pretty closely with George RR Marting. George likes to call them successor shows or prequels. He says they're not sequels. HBO has said that they will have none of the characters from the series that's running now, the main Game of Thrones TV show, and that it won't be spun off as in like another character will go off and, like the adventures of Hot Pie or whatever, you know what I mean? It's going to be drawn directly from the source material that's already there, and since they're prequels, we're assuming that most of it will be coming from the world of Ice and Fire, or stories that we've heard about in flashbacks. Because we also heard, at the time that we heard there was 5 people, that Robert's Rebellion wouldn't be happening. George R.R. Marting said that he wasn't interested in doing that right now because everybody knows how it ends. It's a little bit of a bad argument, I think, because we watch World War II movies all the time and we know who wins in those as well, but he wasn't into doing that one and he didn't want to do Dunk and Egg, and that's actually pretty significant in this latest announcement, and I'll get to that later. So, as mentioned, HBO hasn't told us anything about any of them. And we don't really know for sure how many of them will get made. Like, we figure at least one of the 5 will get made into a full-on TV show, just like Game of Thrones, that'll be on HBO. But it could be multiples. It could be spread out over time. We don't have any idea about that at all. What George R.R. Marting said was you should not expect to see all 5 shows, though, at least not immediately, as much as I might love the idea. He wrote this on his blog and said, we could possibly see 2 or even 3 make it to the pilot stage, with one series emerging on air in 2019 or 2020. And the others may be later, if they come out as well, as we all hope. So, that is pretty freaking interesting if you think about it, because right now we're not expecting Game of Thrones Season 8 to air until 2019. So the time frame he laid out here, albeit he doesn't really know, would put one of them coming out right after Season 8. And that would make the most sense for HBO. If Season 8 is epic as it's expected to be, the momentum will be right to start another one right then. I mean, I don't think any of these really would be as popular as the original. It just doesn't usually work that way. But I think that they could keep a strong fandom engaged as long as they make it as high quality as Game of Thrones has been. Now, I know a lot of whining fans are out there going, what are you talking about? Game of Thrones is terrible now. I hate the way that it is. Well, guess what? There are no shows on this level as far as production and stuff. And yeah, there's problems with Game of Thrones, and there always has been, frankly, but it's entertaining as shit. And there's going to be more momentum at the time that Season 8 ends than any other time. So let's hope that they put something good together. They have good people working on it. And Bryan Cogman is really interesting because he sort of worked his way up through the ranks from a writer to producer. He's known as the keeper of the lore. That's the way that George R. R. Marting described him. So that's all good stuff. Like, this is the guy you want to be doing it. And he's also in charge of the History and Lore DVD extras, which are some of the best stuff that's associated with the show when you think about it. I mean, we learn a lot there. We see a lot of things, how they were interpreted from the source material and how they relate to the TV show. And I can't really think of any problems I've had with those. So yeah, that's definitely a good thing to have on your resume as far as I'm concerned. So we also know that George R.R. Marting has still not put out The Winds of Winter, and that is definitely stressful for the book crowd, but we did find out that he's going to be putting out his Targaryen history, which he was not supposed to do until after The Winds of Winter was done and A Dream of Spring was done. But he decided to break it up into 2 volumes, and we're actually going to see volume 1 either in late 2018 or early 2019. Now, a lot of people have been talking about this change in direction. I mean, a lot of people are mad, obviously, and I see where they're coming from. It has been too long since the last book in A Song of Ice and Fire. The theories are getting to be like, the theory makers are restless out there. It's just like, everybody's angry at the TV show because they don't have anything else to concentrate on. It's a bad situation for book readers, I would say. We've had little things coming here and there, but it's been a long time since the last main book came out. And with not knowing when it's going to be and having different deadlines come and go, it's definitely been a rough patch of years. And it could go on longer, let's be honest. When you hear that he's putting out a different book instead, that can put off some alarm bells. But, he had most of this book already written, and that's the idea that he's going with. He already had this almost done. So basically what happened is when he wrote The World of Ice and Fire, he started you have to imagine that writing fake history is a lot easier than writing actual, epic fantasy fiction. So this is probably like a good break for him. You don't have to make it anything other than, you have to explain what happened. You just have to tell the story, and the way he does that is through maesters and, of course, fools as well. But either way, you know what I mean? It's easier writing for him, I would imagine. So when he was writing The World of Ice and Fire, he started writing a lot about the Targaryen kings, and then he had so much material left over, it wouldn't fit in the book. So from what I've read, that he's had like 200,000 words cut out from The World of Ice and Fire, which is just sitting around. And we also knew that whenever he wrote The Princess and the Queen, the Greens versus the Blacks, the Dance of the Dragons, they cut out a ton of that too to make it fit in the anthology that it was in. So he already had a lot more written about the Dance of Dragons as well. So what's interesting about all of this is that Martin said that Cogman is going to be working on a very important on a very important time in Westeros. So this would seem to go hand in hand with Targaryens, right? We know that Fire and Blood's coming out, and we know that covers from Aegon, before Aegon, but all the kings that were there up until a certain point. So what does it all mean? Well, I think what my thinking is, and I've read this from a few different people who know a lot more than I do, I think this really points to them doing Dance of the Dragons. I think it's probably the best idea. When I made my prequel video so long ago, when we first heard about it, I said that I thought that was a great idea, except for the fact that the dragons are expensive. Well, a couple months ago, I watched Linda and Elio's video about prequels, and they made a pretty compelling case for why this could actually work, and why it doesn't need as many dragons as you might think. Of course, they know way more about this stuff than I do, since they worked on The World of Ice and Fire. They co-wrote it with George. And so I take them, they made a good argument. It made sense. It made more sense, actually, than some of the other ones that they were talking about. And if he's not talking about the dance, then it almost has to be the conquest. But you would think that maybe somebody else might have picked up on that. I don't know, you know what I mean? But Game of Thrones, the TV show, has made a great DVD extra about the Dance of the Dragons. So it's a material that Cogman would definitely be familiar with, and most fans are. It's, even though he said it wasn't complete in what we got in The Princess and the Queen and The Rogue Prince, there's quite a bit there. So you can imagine it being a pretty good story. Well, 2 more things. First, the idea of Cogman being here is good because he's already clued into how everything works in the Game of Thrones production world. And there's a good chance that he would bring some of those people with him. And you got to imagine they did a lot of trial and error until they got the dragons right. And if you think about the Field of Fire battle, that was pretty on. The visual effects were good there. And they could definitely pick up where they left off and just move into a whole nother level, I think. But what I wanted to point out beyond that is, and I read this in an article in Vanity Fair, it was written by the ASOAIF moderator on Reddit, the subreddit, Brendan Beefish. And he pointed out the fact that with those books changing around, that might be the biggest clue, because Martin has said the reason he said he didn't want to do Dunk and Egg was because he didn't want the TV show to finish the story before he did. So he didn't say that he didn't think Dunk and Egg would be good TV. He said that he wanted to write the rest of the stories first, and then they could think about something like that. So if we look at this, he may be shifting to wanting to have control of the end of the story. He's never really said about how he feels about the TV show, but anybody can guess that if you have something you've been working on for a couple decades and somebody else gets to finish telling the story, that's, even if you tell them what to do, it's not the same. So he definitely doesn't like that idea, and you can't blame him. Even if he thinks the show did a great job, he would have a problem with it, I'm sure. So this is a pretty good train of thought that Brendan Beefish is following here when he's saying that he wants to present his own conclusion. And that gives him a chance to he knows he's not going to get the other books done because season 8's going to come and go. You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of a way for him to be involved with something that can be his, not necessarily his, but can be based on his story from start to finish, with a clear blueprint, and to work with someone who might really be in a good position to carry that out for him. So I think it's cool. It could be Aegon's Conquest, like I said. I just think that's not as interesting of a story. The dance has some problems as well. I mean, Game of Thrones is the best story, I think. I mean, that's the core of the Song of Ice and Fire series, and that's why it's good. But these other things can be done well if they, if they have the right people behind them. And like I said, HBO has not dropped the ball at all as far as production value and budget and everything else that goes into making a really stellar TV show. So I think that this is probably our best bet to have something that's really true to George RR Martin's vision. And I'm excited to see if that's what's the case or not. I mean, it might be a long time, but I'm also interested to hear what you guys think as well. So please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I got a bunch of stuff coming out. I've been trying to put together a couple different series. I want to do the character series first for season 8, so that'll be coming up next. I wanted to get this video out first though, because this is pretty big news. Everybody wonders what they're going to do whenever Game of Thrones ends. Well, it looks like we're going to have another good show. I mean, we have people competing to make one show that's going to come out, so that's always good, I think. But yeah, so please, follow me over on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. We can interact over there. And check out my Patreon. I could really use your support. I would like to keep doing a lot of stuff all the time, but you know how it goes. It's a difficult way to make a living. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you soon.